This is draft season. Welcome to the show, everybody. We're into the second week of December here. I'm on about 3 hours of sleep off the Giants Monday Night Football game against the Green Bay Packers. A fun win, but I'm exhausted. So if I'm a little incoherent today, I apologize. Luckily, we have Tony Pauline from Sportskeeda to carry us as always. Big show coming your way today. We got some great questions on Twitter from you guys. We'll ask Tony later on in the show. But first, we're going to take a look at some feature players from the 2023 rookie class and see how they're doing so far through 13 weeks in the NFL season. So we'll do all that and more on draft season. Tony, how are you, man?
I'm okay, except I'm incoherent most of the time. So even at your worst, that's my best. So I'm sure hopefully the viewers won't mind.
No, I think we'll be okay. Let's get to the quarterbacks first here in terms of the 2023 class, Tony. And we'll spend more time on some guys. We'll kind of fly through some others here with all these positions because there's a lot of guys to talk about. I just want to do a little bit extra on CJ Stroud because we talked about him out last year, Tony. We both had Bryce Young as the number one quarterback, and I still think based on the evidence that made sense. And you talked a lot about it. I'm going to pat you on the back here, how, we didn't see him in the context of the Ohio State offense really open it up until that Georgia game where he ran around, did a bunch of awesome stuff. And you know what it turned out? That was CJ Stroud. It was one game. It was a small sample. And we're like, well, can he repeat that? Well, guess what? That's the guy we've seen as a rookie, and he's been fantastic.
Yeah, and I was critical, and I still am, of the Ohio State coaching staff. I mean, you look what Kyle McCord did this year, I'm saying. He was basically the same quarterback at the end of the season that he was in game one. And it was very much like that with CJ Stroud from his first start against Oregon up until that Georgia game where he was magnificent. And I blame the Ohio State coaching staff for putting the handcuffs on him. He'd step to the line of scrimmage and he'd be looking over the sidelines. They wouldn't let him run the offense. And I think CJ Stroud is the perfect example of you can draft the most talented signal caller in the world if you don't have good coaching, if you don't have good player development. Guy's going to turn out to be a dud. Fortunately for CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans, it's not turned out to be that way. He protects the football. He makes good decisions. People look at the stats. He's lost some of his weapons. Tank Dell's now down for the entire season. Nico Collins left the game Sunday with the Jets. They lost the tight end. So now he's going to have to, find ways, manufacture ways to be more productive. But listen, you've got to be ecstatic if you are a fan or an employee of the Houston Texans with the development of CJ Stroud.
And then on the other hand, you talk about needing good development and things happening around you to have success, Tony. Well, just look at Bryce Young in Carolina. Yeah. That place is a mess. I don't even know what we can take out of this for Bryce Young. I went back and watched them all 22 on them earlier in the year. No one gets open. The offensive line can't block. Obviously, the whole coaching situation there is a mess. Guys getting fired already. I feel bad for the kid. He didn't have a chance this year. And now whomever they hire next year, it's almost like it's his rookie year. I'm not even sure how much growth he gets out of a year like this.
And then you have the optics of CJ Stroud, who was selected behind him, right? Yep. So it's not only just Bryce Young is doing so poorly, it's just CJ Stroud is doing so incredibly well, and the optics aren't good. And you're right. I mean, I know there was a lot of concern within the building about his technique, his footwork. They were going to let him try and work through it. It didn't work out. They were going to work on it. Then Frank Reich got fired. The quarterback, Coach McCown got fired. They fired
and a bunch of other guys. Too.
Yeah. I mean, and you talk about the offensive line. I mean, in the 2022 draft, they used an early pick on what they hope would be a franchise left tackle. That's not really panned out. So yeah, it's not good. You can't basically just shut the door on Bryce Young at this point in time. I think the concerns with Bryce Young is going into it, we loved his intelligence. We loved the way he ran the offense, the way he commanded the ball, the way he controlled the situation. The concerns were his size and the arm strength, and really a lot of the things that we were relying on to make Bryce Young our number one quarterback has not panned out, which is a concern. We'll see what happens. We'll see how involved the owner is there. But, yeah, I mean, they really have to clean house, and they've got to do what the Houston Texans did, what the San Francisco 49ers have done with Brock Purdy, get people in there who know how to develop a quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. And, you're right. And I think the height and the arm strength, it has flashed here or there in terms of being an issue, but everything just around him has not been good this year. The other quarterbacks, we've seen some Aiden O'Connell this year, Tony. I know you liked him a lot. He's had some good moments, did not play very well this week. Obviously got shut out by the Vikings, whose defense has been a lot of teams' trouble. Anthony Richardson obviously played a little bit the first couple of games. I thought what he showed was promising. But again, we just didn't see a whole lot of him until the injuries came up. And then, look, I was probably a little bit higher on Will Levis than others, and I think he's showing something with Tennessee, right? There's still some rawness there as a passer, but my God, the kid's a maniac. It looks like he's basically like drink 8 cups of coffee before every game. He ran over Jalen Ramsey in the game this week. He makes plays. He's willing to throw the ball down the field. He's mobile. I think if Tennessee can develop him, there is something there with Will Levis. You could take any or all of those players in whatever order you want.
Well, I think Levis was in a good situation where he wasn't thrown in as a starter from day one. I mean, he was eventually midway through the season, and his game has really taken off. So I think sitting on the sidelines, observing, I think the fact that he didn't go as early as he thought he did was a good thing because it kind of brought him down to earth. And
chip on the shoulder.
Chip on his shoulder now. So it's worked out for Tennessee. It's worked out for Will Levis. Aiden O'Connell, I mean, he's shown flashes. He's a real leader. He's somebody that Devontae Adams likes, but the offensive line there isn't really good. And Aiden O'Connell was never a really mobile RPO type quarterback, so he's getting killed at times. They got to, if he's going to be their man moving forward, and I give them credit for sticking with Aiden O'Connell the rest of the season, they better be able to protect him. Anthony Richardson, there were flashes. He got injured. Who knows? Maybe watching Gardner Minshew for 2/3 of the season will hopefully benefit Anthony Richardson in 2024.
All right, let's go. And by the way, I want to ask you this. We haven't even talked about this yet. Tommy DeVito.
Yeah.
What did you have on him coming out last year? We never spoke about him in all the shows we did last year.
Not much. I mean, nobody did. He played the Shrine Game. He was decent at the Shrine Bowl. He's shown a lot of good things. Credit to the Giants, for basically saying, we're going to stick with them till the end. There's no reason to put Tyrod Taylor back in, and it's reap rewards. I don't think Tommy DeVito is the starter of the future. I think Tommy DeVito is a good backup. It's a great story, but really there wasn't that much on Tommy DeVito's reason why he didn't get a combine invite. I don't want to say reason why he went to the Shrine Bowl, because the Shrine Bowl has been an exceptional outlet for quarterbacks the past couple of years since Eric Galko took over. I really didn't have that much. Neither did other teams, which is why he wasn't a combine invite, which is why he wasn't drafted.
And that's why, and most scouts did not have a draftable grade on him, I would imagine, from guys you talked to.
None that I spoke with had a draftable grade on.
All right, let's go to running back here, Tony. And this was a group that had a lot of guys at the top, so why don't we start there? Bijan Robinson, I know fantasy owners of Bijan Robinson have been frustrated this year because he's splitting a lot of time, maybe not getting as many touches as people would like. And he hasn't really had that monster game moment, but I think he's had a good rookie year. I don't think you really complain about it. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, is kind of given Detroit what you would think, though, again, I think Lion fans wish he got the ball a little bit more, but he's not really that bell cow type of back. What do you think about those first 2 backs off the board?
It's interesting with Robinson because he was taken so early. He was, the 8th pick of the draft. Yep. The quarterback at Atlanta is struggling. Desmond Ridder, he's up and down. You would think that they would try and feature Bijan Robinson, but they don't. When they do give him the ball, I mean, he's got 790 yards rushing. He's averaging, almost 5 yards, 4.7 yards per carry. So he's getting the job done. I don't know. I think it's more the system and the coaching staff more than it is Bijan Robinson. With Atlanta, who is kind of fighting for a playoff spot, you'd think they want to give him the ball, especially with the struggles that Desmond Ridder has had. Jahmyr Gibbs started off slowly. He picked it up. There have been flashes. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs was definitely the second best running back in the draft. Whether he was worth a mid-first round pick, that's debatable. But the fact is, Detroit just took the guys that they wanted, that they thought were best, that fit their needs. And Jahmyr Gibbs went a lot earlier than everyone thought. I think he is. I don't think he's a 2025 carry. I never thought he was that type of back. Few backs are, these days. But I think, in the overall scheme of it, he's done relatively well.
Yeah, I agree. But I don't think both those guys, what we thought about them coming out as players, they've shown to be that type of player in the pros. I think the scouting on those guys has been right on. 2 running backs, Tony, that are speed backs One was drafted, one was not drafted very high. I don't know if he was drafted at all, actually. You have Devon Achane, who's been unbelievable with Miami
Yeah.
when he's been healthy. Again, the problem is that he was 180 pounds, right? And he did hurt his knee already once this year, and then he re-injured it. But when he's healthy, he's been dynamic. And then Keaton Mitchell, who's come on really late for Baltimore. He was undrafted, correct? Keaton Mitchell, he did not get drafted, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
I am looking that up as we speak. I don't think he was. He was a combine invite, but I don't.
But those two speed guys, Tony, I think it kind of shows you where the running back position is going, right? Where maybe teams aren't so concerned with size. If they have that speed, they'll find a role for you, even again if it's not that bell cow back.
Yeah, Mitchell was undrafted, and Akon I thought was underdrafted. I thought he was worthy of an early second round pick. I think
Yeah,
you're
you
getting
liked him a lot. Yeah.
exactly what you thought with him. He's a guy who picks up huge chunks of yardage from the line of scrimmage. You know, when the ball's in his hands, he's a situational back. He's a third down type back. Obviously, he's got to stay healthy. Not the biggest guy in the world. And Mitchell was the same sort of back coming out of East Carolina. I mean, he's he's a fast guy. He's a creative ball carrier. He's a perimeter ball carrier who basically can run the daylight. You can also use him as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And really, for the Ravens to get that type of value out of a guy that they didn't draft, I mean, they've done it before, those situational type backs, and Mitchell's a good complement there.
And he's taken on a bigger role as the season has gone along in that kind of three-headed monster backfield with Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. And Mitchell really gets more touches than those other players now. It's a really nice job. A couple of the running backs, Tony, mid-round guys I want to touch on. Zach Charbonnet, who I think has been kind of who we thought he would be in Seattle. He's a tough grinder between the tackles, not a lot of explosives. He's done okay in the passing game. He's complimented Kenneth Walker pretty well. And then Tyjae Spears is a guy that is stuck behind Derrick Henry. But when he's gotten opportunities, I think he's done pretty well with them. And I think Henry's a free agent. I would not be surprised if the Titans, maybe they don't give Spears the keys to the car. I'm not sure. Again, he's a 20 to 25 carry guy, but I could see him being their number one back next year.
And it's interesting because Charbonnet was drafted by a team that really had Charbonnet himself should be a feature runner. He's your grinder, as you said. And he was selected by a team that already has that type of back. So I don't know how many, I was surprised more so by the fact that the Seahawks selected him with considering the back they had as their number one back.
Yeah. And Kenneth Walker had a great rookie year. He's a young player too.
Right. So I just didn't see the fit there. I don't think Charbonnet is disappointed. I just think that, there's, no room at the in for him. Where Spears, I think, is a perfect complement. I mean, you got the grinder and Derrick Henry. You got Tyjae Spears, who, guy who on film plays very fast. He's a perimeter ball carrier. We saw him last year at the Senior Bowl with basically making defenders miss in the open field and having guys grasping at air. And that's what he is. He's a real good third down back, situational runner, toss sweep around the corner, around the perimeter type of ball carrier. I think if you're going to go from Derrick Henry to Tyjae Spears, you're going to have to change some things in your offense to make it more formative for Tyjae Spears. But I think Spears was a good fit, and I think he's done relatively well.
One other running back I want to bring up is I was a lot higher than him and everybody else, and he hadn't really gotten an opportunity until the last couple of weeks, Tony. And that's Chase Brown out of Illinois, who went to Cincinnati. And the Bengals are starting to give him some touches now. He had a big screen pass that went for a touchdown. He ran for 60 yards a couple weeks ago. He's made the most of his touches. And, Joe Mixon's getting a little bit older. He's not as effective. We'll see how long they keep him there. I think Chase Brown is showing he can be an effective runner in the NFL.
Yeah, and I mean, he was a great runner at Illinois. I think the thing with Chase Brown was he was an interior runner. He was a grinder at Illinois. The question is, did he have the speed to turn the corner? But he's a real good football player. And I would agree with you. I mean, he is – I think he's a situational ball carrier now that could eventually be the number one guy in an offense.
All right, let's go to wide receiver here, Tony, as we move along. And not surprising, in the modern NFL, you're going to have by the way, any other running backs you want to touch on?
The only kid I would point out, another player is Jaleel McLaughlin of Denver Broncos. Undrafted free agent out of Youngstown State. He was a guy who was a great story, was homeless for a while, stayed for a second senior season, has done real well in a situational role with the Denver Broncos. It's a good story. It's a good player. He's been productive for a Denver Bronco team that, everyone thought they were dead in the water after September, midway through October. Now they're fighting for a playoff spot.
No question. All right, now let's go to wide receiver. And how do we not start with Puka Nacua?
Yeah.
and he's been phenomenal this year. He's a guy that he only practiced one day at the Senior Bowl, Tony, and in that one day, I think he led the practice in
Yeah.
catches. But you look at him, you're like, oh, he's not that fast. All right, he's not, huge. He's well built. He's good size, but he's not gigantic. No traits really jump out at you, but the guy just knows how to get open. He has good hands. He stayed healthy, which is something that he had trouble doing in college, which I know was a red flag for him. And boy, he's been fantastic for the Rams this year, leading all rookies in catches, yards, and every other stat you can imagine.
Great receiver. I mean, here's a guy who I remember in the lead up to the draft, I was talking to his people, and I said he's a third round pick. I had a third round grade on him. They said, no, he's going to go in the fifth round, which is just about where he went. And a guy who has delivered. I mean, you want those athletes that run the 4.3s, that are 6'2", but you need football players. And that's what he is. He's a football player.
Dude, he blocks for them. The blocking he does in that offense is unbelievable.
He finds a soft spot in the defense. He knows how to get open. He tracks the pass in the air. I mean, he beats opponents intellectually as much as he does physically, if that makes sense. And he's been incredibly productive. I'm very happy to see it because I was always a fan of his game at BYU.
Yeah, and hope he can stay. He has battled some injuries here or there in the NFL. He's managed to stay on the field, and hopefully he'll be able to continue to do that. And, one of the themes we had in last year's wide receiver class, Tony, and I'll take these guys as a group here, is how important is size in the NFL now at wide receiver, right? Not only do we have short wide receivers last year, wide receivers that did not weigh a whole lot. All right, so I'll take a group here. I'll put them all together. Tank Dell, who was dominant at the Senior Bowl. He's been one of the top rookie wide receivers until he obviously broke his leg, and now he's out for the year. But he's been phenomenal. Zay Flowers has done a really nice job in Baltimore, obviously. I don't know if he's quite the number one some people claimed he was coming out, but he's been good. Josh Downs in Indianapolis has had a really good year. I always kind of proposed I didn't see much of a difference between Downs and Flowers. Flowers has been better, but not that much better. And then Jordan Addison, another guy that's not the biggest guy, came in low weight. He's been a very effective receiver for the Vikings, especially when Kirk Cousins was healthy. And Justin Jefferson went out, and guess what? Jordan Addison was like, all right, you need me to be the number one? I'll be the number one. And their offense didn't miss much of a beat. So for me, those guys, Tony, are kind of showing in the NFL. And wide receiver, maybe size isn't that important anymore.
It's about route running. It's about being able to get off the line of scrimmage quickly and beat your man from the snap of the ball. And that's really what Downs and Tank Dell do. They're more vertical guys. They're quick off the line. They get that first step on the cornerback, and the cornerbacks are playing catch up. With Addison and Zay Flowers, you're looking at exceptional route runners where the DBs cannot stay on the receiver's hip out of routes. These guys separate, fundamentally sound, and they extend their hands. They catch the ball away from their frame. Solid run after the catch skill. Neither of these guys are true burners. Neither of these guys are true vertical threats, but they just play, it's timing. It's the ability to separate. And it's kind of funny. I would agree with you. Zay Flowers, I don't view him as the number one receiver, but with all the failure that the Baltimore Ravens have had in the past with receivers in the first round, I mean, they finally hit on one. And I mean, he's been a terrific player in that offense for a quarterback that needs a reliable pair of hands.
All right, and then some mid-round receivers I want to touch on, Tony. Before we hit on one more first-rounder, I'll save him for last. Jayden Reed, who, again, had a really nice Senior Bowl in Mobile. And, guys, if you really want to find out what receiver is going to be good, if you get open and you dominate in Mobile, guess what? You're probably going to be a pretty good pro because it does carry over. He's done a nice job. Jalen Hyatt has flashed what we thought he would flash as a deep threat. He hasn't really rounded out his game yet in terms of doing other stuff. And then Rashee Rice is interesting. It's a guy that we talked about a lot last year. And I kind of saw him as kind of a, semi-contested catch guy, okay route runner, not a super athlete. The Chiefs almost use him as a run after the catch guy. And I think he's proven to be a little bit more athletic than I thought he was coming out of SMU. I think he might be the Chiefs' best receiver.
He's also, got his priorities straight, because there was a lot of red flags about Rashee Rice. There was a lot of, wow, when the Chiefs took him at the end of the round too, but it's turned out well. And listen, when you get a leader like Patrick Mahomes, who is able to get everybody in that receiving stable, pass catching stable on the same path, probably wishes you had Kadarius Toney on side Sunday night. It does wonders when you have other really good players and other leaders around. So Rashee Rice is This is a lot of what I saw Rashee Rice when he was at the best of his game. I mean, he was a real good receiver at SMU, and he took over after they had the Gray kid, and they had a couple of guys leave the prior year. The question with Rashee Rice was the off the field issues or the off the field disturbances, if you will. And he's put that behind him, and he's developed into the receiver that I think a lot of people thought he would be.
Yeah, and again, I think Jayden Reed's done a nice job. They use him on end arounds, wide receiver screens. He's quick, he's fast, he can separate. Last guy I want to touch on, Tony, then you can throw in anyone you want to touch on, is Quentin Johnston. I believe he was the first wide receiver taken in the draft, if I'm not mistaken, right? And
Correct.
I had my concerns about him. To me, he was a big guy that looked like a contested catch downfield player, but he wasn't very good at that. He was more of a yak guy, and I wasn't sure he was athletic enough for that to translate. And for a Chargers team that lost Mike Williams due to injury, then they lost Josh Palmer to injury, and they really needed somebody to step up a wide receiver. And Quentin Johnston, quite frankly, has not really been able to fill that void. I think it's been disappointing given all the other receivers that were on the board when they made that selection.
And we're seeing the same thing from Quentin Johnston on Sunday that we saw on Saturday. A lot of body catching, a guy who, lets catchable throws slip through his hands, a guy who, has to rely on physically beating down opponents, which is a lot tougher thing to do in the NFL than it is in college.
Not a great route runner either, right?
He never was, though. He never was, though.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's an imposing looking guy on film, and you look at the size. He ran much faster than people expected during the pro day workout. We were hearing 4.6s and things like that. He ran in the high 4.4s. You figure, okay, we're going to develop him. He's just not developed his game. I mean, he's more reputation than reality at this point. I'm sorry, not even reputation. He's more potential. There is no the reason he's living up to his reputation. I apologize. He's a guy who doesn't catch the ball correctly and can't run routes. He's more, potential than production.
Any other wide receivers you want to hit, Tony?
Not on my list. You hit them all.
All right, let's go to tight end here. Folks, we're going a little long here, so maybe we'll do the offensive players in the 2023 class today, and we'll do defense next week, since there's still not a whole lot of college football being played. So, Tony, tight end, it was a really good tight end class, and I think they've kind of lived up to it, to be honest with you. The two first tight ends taken were Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta. We both loved Laporta, I think, more than most people have. He's been the best rookie tight end. He's been fantastic. And Dalton Kincaid has done a nice job for the Bills as well. I think those guys have lived up to their billing.
Kincaid has really put it on late in the season. Laporta was good from the get-go, and Laporta was just an underrated guy. He wasn't super fast. Laporta was sort of like Jordan Addison's of the tight end position, in the sense that, he wasn't a great athlete. We go back to some of the running backs we talked about, just a real good football player. And he was always that at Iowa. He was like that at Iowa for 3 years. Catches the ball well, smart, makes a lot of plays with his head. I think Dalton Kincaid is a situation where, the more he plays, the better he's going to get, because he really was never Utah's starting tight end until the middle of the season when Brian Queeth went down in 2022. So you're starting to see a lot of rewards being reaped at that point in time. I think both of these guys are outstanding players, and they're not great blockers, but they do a decent job blocking.
Yeah, they try, they effort, and as they go along, if you have the willingness, you'll be able to get a little bit better at it, at least. Two other tight ends, Tony, I want to touch on. Luke Musgrave, who I think started the season pretty well. Then he had an injury, which, again, that's something that plagued him late in his college career, too. And now he's with Green Bay. And then Michael Mayer, who was really quiet earlier in the year, has come on a little bit since the coaching change happened, but he still really hasn't exploded yet in the passing game.
But I never expected him to. I mean, we knew what Michael Mayer was. I said it, if it was 1985 or 1994, Michael Mayer is a top 10 pick. Michael Mayer is your traditional 3-down tight end. He's a guy who's very good, 8 to 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. Maybe he breaks one down the field on occasion. He's an exceptional blocker. He goes over the middle of the field and makes a difficult catch in a crowd. But he's not, the field stretcher that we see today. He's not the Laporta. He's not the Kincaid. I think with Musgrave, again, he's got a lot of potential. He's got a lot of upside, but he's got to stay healthy. And the other tight end I'll talk about is Tyler Kraft, the guy who's come in to replace Musgrave, on that team. And he's shown a lot of skill, which he did at South Dakota State. He was a guy who I don't think he ran as fast as people expected, but if you watched him at South Dakota State, he was a tight end who played the position like a receiver. They'd flex him out wide. They line him up in the slot. He'd go down the middle of the field. He'd make a lot of big catches. And that's what he's starting to do since he stepped into the lineup for Musgrave. And, how ironic is it, all those years that Aaron Rodgers were there, the Packer fans were screaming for them to draft a receiver, draft a tight end. And then they draft 2 tight ends back to back in the 2023 draft. And it looks like they hit on both of them.
And they got a bunch of young first and second year receivers with Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed. Dontavian Wicks has actually done a pretty good job for them too as a rookie wide receiver.
Yes.
So a lot of good young skill position guys for the Packers. All right, finally, offensive line, Tony. And really, you could make the argument DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State, the gigantic right tackle, has been the best offensive lineman from this class. You got him with a really good offensive line coach with Callahan at the Browns. They've plugged him in there. And we saw him dominate one day at the Senior Bowl. We worried about his weight. There was other stuff that people were talking about in terms of focus on football and, kind of football character stuff. But he's turned out to play really, really well in his rookie year.
Jack Conklin goes down. DeJuan Jones goes in. You figure, I'll forget about it. And DeJuan Jones, he's been outstanding. I mean, he's been terrific. Still very large, doesn't have great lateral blocking range, but, he's showing a lot of those things that we saw that one day in Senior Bowl practice, last year in February, where he just dominated everybody. And I mean, he has that potential. He just has to put that focus and play that way on every snap. And it looks like he is. I mean, DeJuan Jones is the perfect example of what not to do in the lead up to the draft when you have that sort of talent. He played the one day at the Senior Bowl. He was great. He mailed it the rest of the way in. He went to the combine. He ran the 40. He went to pro day. I was at the pro day. I mean, he was standing around in sweats. He wouldn't do anything. And all he did was, excuse the expression, piss off everybody in the NFL, which is why he went in the 4th round. The Browns took him. Somebody lit a fire on them. They flipped the switch. And, we're seeing the DeJuan Jones that we thought we were going to see after that one day of Senior Bowl practice. Good for him. I hope he keeps it up.
Yeah, talent-wise, he was the second-round player, but it was all the other stuff, right, that I think gave teams pause. 2 guards that I think have done a good job. Steve Avila, Tony, who I know I was a huge fan of. I thought he was a very safe pick in the draft last year. He's done a nice job. And Peter Skoronski has done a nice job as well, who we thought would convert pretty well from tackle to guard.
Yeah, I mean, Avila's a guy. He can play guard. He can play center. He's big. He's just a power gap guy. He's not a guy that you're going to pull across the line of scrimmage, get him out on the second level and block on a lot of times, because that's not his game. But if you're looking for a punch in the mouth type of run blocker who's also a real good pass protector, he's got a lot of skill, and he's a guy that people think could eventually play center down the line. Skoronski, remember Skoronski? A lot of people thought he was going to be a very early 1st-round pick. He had the short arms. Titans took him. They kicked him inside the guard. He's done a real good job at guard. And, when you have those types of guards that are dominant players on the interior, they're worth early picks, as we're seeing with Skoronski.
All right, and then some offensive tackles. Tony Darnell Wright, I think, has done a pretty nice job for the Bears. Paris Johnson has had some struggles from time to time, but I think overall the Cardinals were probably pretty happy with what they have with him. And then the other 1st-round tackle, Broderick Jones with the Steelers, he's had trouble getting on the field and breaking into the starting lineup there.
Well, he's been playing pretty well for them recently, I believe, yes. Broderick Jones. So he had trouble getting on the field early in the season. Now he's moved into the starting lineup, and he's done relatively well at right tackle. I think Paris Johnson was, correct me if I'm wrong, but Paris Johnson is actually playing right tackle for the Arizona Cardinals. He's not playing left tackle, where he played for 3 years at Ohio State. And I don't know about that, because in my opinion, he's a potentially great left tackle. Put him over there, let him protect the blind side, let him be a left tackle where he's best. Darnell Wright has been a dominant run blocker, as we knew he would be, because that's what he was at Tennessee. That's what he was during the Senior Bowl practices. He's had his ups and downs in pass protection, but still, I mean, he's a terrific run blocker on the right side. Hopefully he puts together the complete game and he learns how to pass protect.
Yeah, they put him next to Tevin Jenkins, and those guys have actually, I think Tevin Jenkins is a right guard for them. They've actually done a really, really nice job this year for the Bears. All right, let's do some questions here. I put up a tweet the other day, got a lot of good responses. I don't think we'll get to all of these today. We got about 10 minutes to roll here, so we'll get to as many as we can. We'll save the rest for next week as the second half of our show when we do our defensive players from the 2023 class. And then, Tony, before we say goodbye, he can go through any news that broke this week, too, in terms of the draft that he wants to touch on. All right, this one from Steven Sperry. Tony, he wants to know, can you review the top 6 quarterbacks in this draft based on arm talent, accuracy, vision, decision-making, and what rounds do you think they'll go? So I don't know why he picked 6, but you can kind of go through real quick your thumbnail on the top quarterbacks in the class in terms of throwing the football, arm talent, vision, accuracy, decision-making.
Well, I maybe he thinks 6 are going to go in the first round. I don't know about that. Obviously, you got Caleb Williams and Drake May at the top. They're different types of quarterbacks. Drake May is more of your conventional, who just announced the other day that he's going to enter the draft, that he's more of your conventional pocket passer, not your RPO passer, where Caleb Williams, as you like to say, does a lot of off-platform throwing, gets outside the pocket, keeps his eyes down the field, seems to pull a rabbit out of a hat when things, and improvise when things are not available. There's going to be some questions about his footwork. He throws a lot of passes flat-footed. You're not going to be able to do that. I think after that, I'd like to put Shedeur Sanders in there, but all signs point to Sanders returning to Colorado, so I'm going to leave him out. Then you got Jayden Daniels. I mean, Jayden Daniels, who's had a fantastic season. I mean, definitely on the upswing. How early is he going to go? I talked to somebody yesterday, and they say they talk to people in the league, and he's going to go very early. I don't know that I would take him that early, 6'3.5", 202 pounds, but you can't argue with the success that he's had. The end of the 2022 season and 2023. I think Drake May probably has the strongest arm of those three.
Yeah.
Then Williams, then Daniels. Quinn Ewers looks like he's going. J.J. McCarthy, I should say, is number 4 on my board. He's more of your, I don't say he's a game manager because he's also a playmaker. He's more like Caleb Williams in the sense that he's an RPO guy. He gets outside the pocket, makes throws on the move. He can make plays with his legs. As far as the arm strength, he's probably at the bottom of the 4 guys I just mentioned. Then, I mean, it's anybody's guess. I mean, I got Quinn Ewers. It looks like Ewers is going to go back. I think you'd have to look at the other 2 Heisman Trophy finalists, Michael Penix and Bo Nix. I mean, Penix probably has the strongest arm of anybody. He can flick the ball down the field, get the ball downfield with a flick of his wrist. The accuracy is a concern. I mean, when you watch Michael Penix highlights, oftentimes there are better receptions than there are passes. But it's just that Penix is able to get the ball downfield so quickly because of his arm strength. Bo Nix, he's just a smart game manager type who makes plays with his arm, with his leg. He's not a pure vertical passer, but I think in a timing offense, he would do very well.
Yeah, I'm starting to go through the quarterbacks here, Tony. I kind of waited to the end till the full body of work was in. I watched every drop back that Drake May's made this year, and boy, strong kid. He's hard to bring down. Has some crazy throws that he tries to make while he's getting hit and tackled, which turns into some rough ones. And his last 2 games weren't the best, but yeah, he is a old school traditional pocket passer that can also, avoid the rush and slide in the pocket, throw on the move. He's a heck of a player. I look forward to watching the rest of this quarterback class in detail. Alan Brathwaite, he wants to know about Braylon Allen. What do you think of him, Tony? What round pre-combine should he be available at in terms of this running back class?
I'm not as high on Allen as a lot of other people. I think he's a little bit too big. He was supposed to be, I believe he was up to 245 pounds at some point. That's a little bit too big. I think he's, if you're looking for a power gap ball carrier, if you're looking for that interior grinder, he's going to be a guy that you look to, I believe, in the 3rd round of the draft. I mean, we've talked about this with the running backs. There's no true feature runner at the top of this year's class. But maybe Braylon Allen is your true feature runner if you're looking for a ball carrier that's basically going to run between the tackles and downhill, because that's what he does so well.
Couple questions about the NIL market, Tony, and how that's going to affect specifically day 2 and 3 quarterbacks and that market, and just even players at other positions. Are you seeing more guys going back to school and not rushing their path to the NFL?
Absolutely. I mean, Drake May's the only guy that has announced, right? And you hear Marvin Harrison talk about how he's wavering back and forth. And I know we're going to get to a Marvin Harrison question, but this kind of goes
answer it now. Go ahead. What do you think?
This kind of goes in with the news. Marvin Harrison, a week ago, a lot of people were questioning me when I talked about Caleb Williams, about how he's going to take his time to go through the process, see what kind of NIL deal he's going to get. And I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets an NIL deal anywhere from $30 to $35 million. And a lot of people said you're crazy. Well, Marvin Harrison comes out and he says he's about 50-50 because he wants to go back to Ohio State because he doesn't want to leave Ohio State knowing never beating Michigan. And then reports come out that the NIL deal that Ohio State is offering Marvin Harrison is comparative to the same type of contract or first-year contract that he would get if he goes into the NFL draft that is an early first-round pick, which means it's going to be around $25 million. So there were reports out there that right now Marvin Harrison is getting an NIL deal close to $25 million. I mean, you and I talked about a player, off the record, before this. And I say to anyone says to me, it depends on the player's mindset. If the player really enjoys playing college football and he enjoys the college experience, he should stay because you're not going to get that back. And the NFL is a completely different ball of wax. I mean, the spectrum curve is different, not just on the field, but off the field, in the locker room. The mentality, the learning, the play, everything is different. If you enjoy college and you're not an early first round pick, stay in college. If you're done with your college career and you're ready to move on, move on. I think what the NIL has done is, we talked about it last week with Tyler Schlow, the kid from Texas Tech, who's moving to his third school. It's giving the opportunity for some of these players who want to improve their draft stock to do so. I was talking with somebody yesterday, Jordan Burch, the pass rusher from Oregon. They're contemplating giving him an NIL deal worth $1 million to return. So, this Jordan Burch.
Isn't Burch a fifth-year player already, Tony? Am I wrong about that?
He's got the second year of eligibility because of the COVID year that the NC2A granted everybody. Jack Nelson, I'm told Jack Nelson of Wisconsin is contemplating going back to school because he feels the offensive tackle, if he goes back to school and has a big year, he can be a first-round pick. The fact that he's going to be, he can go back to school, work on his game, hopefully be a first-round pick, or in his mind, be a first-round pick in 2025. Plus, he's going to get an NIL deal that's going to be worth several $100,000. That's an added bonus. That will make the decision easier for those guys who want to go back. I also want to say one thing. I was thinking about this when I was watching the Heisman Trophy Award. We talk about the NIL deals. Dylan Gabriel now going from Oklahoma to Oregon. It's very curious that you had three quarterbacks there: Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, guys who improved their play, improved their draft stock, all there for the Heisman Trophy. They all have two things in common. They all transferred from schools: Bo Nix, Auburn; Penix, Indiana; Jaden Daniels, Arizona State. But they've all been with their programs for 2 years. That says a lot. They didn't go to those schools and just have one breakout year and improve their draft. They all played there for 2 years. And, you look at, say, Sam Hartman, a guy who we thought, when he just basically carried that Wake Forest offense for 3 years and was a phenomenal player. We all thought when he goes to Notre Dame with that great offensive line, with all those weapons, wow, Notre Dame's going to be a team to beat as far as college football playoffs. And you can't tell me right now that Sam Hartman was a better player in 2023 than he was in 2022. So I think there's something where, those quarterbacks that have been in those programs for a couple of years, more than coincidentally, were the dynamic quarterbacks this year.
All right, Tony, we'll do one more question. We only got through half of them, so we have plenty left for next week. Guys, keep sending them in. I'll retweet that out at some point this week. You can send in even more, and we will get to it next week along with the 2023 defensive draft class. Kyle Buddha, we aren't, and I'm kind of springing you this one, Tony, so I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot. Why aren't we talking more about Dorian Strong after the season he had at Virginia Tech this year? His stats are unreal. Out of FBS quarterbacks of 500-plus snaps, number one out of 243 in terms of completions allowed, completion percentage allowed, number one, receiving yards allowed, number one, NFL quarterback rating against him, number one. What are your thoughts on Dorian Strong, Tony?
Dorian Strong, unless he's made an announcement that I am unaware of, he's one of those guys that is considering going back for another year at Virginia Tech, and they want to keep him. Unless something's happened in the past week that I am unaware of. Now, why aren't we talking about? Well, Virginia Tech has really not played all that well. I'm looking at my grades here. I was told that he is He came into the season, really ungraded by the scouting services, and now he looks to be a potential day 2 pick. Want to see his actual size, how big he is. That may be a concern. Is he a starting corner? Is he a nickelback? Is he a dime back? I think the conversation, as far as right now, is kind of moot, because from what I'm told, unless something's broke in the past couple of days, Dorian Strong's very likely to return to Virginia Tech next year.
All right, Tony, you mentioned a couple of these over the course of the show already. What other news kind of broke this week in terms of guys going back, transfer portal, declaring, Senior Bowl? Anything jump out at you that fans should know about?
I think the only thing is, Caleb Williams is not playing he's not playing in the bowl game, but he hasn't officially entered the draft, which I think he's eventually going to do. But again, I go back to what I said earlier in this show and last week. I'm sure he's going to assess the NIL deals. He's going to look at USC and he's going to make his decision. I don't think that there's going to be a decision real soon. It is interesting, though, watching all these guys go back. I had wrote an article last week on Sportskeeda about the money that the schools are passing around to keep these guys, that some of these transfer portal, some of these NIL deals were discussed before guys actually entered the transfer portal. So it's like free agency for college football. It's going to be very interesting over the next couple of weeks to see if we have any surprises. I do think Marvin Harrison will eventually enter the draft, but the fact that he's come out publicly and said he's 50-50 because he wants to return just shows you how potent and how powerful these NIL deals are.
Yeah, and stay tuned to draft season, folks. We'll be with you every week the rest of the way until the 4th week of April or whatever it is, and we'll have the NFL draft this year. So we'll be with you every week. We'll keep track of all the news, declarations, returning to school, transfers, anything else that's significant to the 2024 NFL draft. You will have a few right here on draft season. Bowl season's going to kind of be getting going a little bit next week, Tony. So we'll preview some of the early bowl games next week. We'll do our 2023 draft class, and we'll continue to answer some questions along with everything else. Good stuff, Tony. Always fun. I think I got through the show without passing out and falling asleep, so I think that's great. I didn't stumble too much or say anything too incoherent, so I think it went well. I'm pretty happy with it.
John, it's one of the few times I've actually had to hold you up. It's usually the other way around, right, brother?
Tony, good stuff, my man. Appreciate it. This is draft season, everybody. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time as you continue to track the 2024 draft class.